Hello and welcome back to the News Project Live on Friday, November 20th. The weekend is almost here. Good to have you with us today. We're going to lead off with some of the latest news on the COVID front, which, as many of you probably already know, is sort of been a bit on the depressing side. This week, yesterday, Thursday, we saw the 148 new cases reported, which was a single day high. And just a little while ago, at the governor's press conference, it was announced that there were 140 new cases yesterday reported. So not an all-time record high, but certainly very close to that, and far too high of a number for any of us to be thrilled about. There was also one additional death. That brings the total in Vermont since the pandemic began to 62 Vermonters that we've lost. In terms of a county by county breakdown, at least as of yesterday, the majority, well, the greatest number of cases have been centered up in Washington and Chittenden counties, nearly 90 cases up there. Down here in Benton County, that number is only 3, which by comparison sounds pretty good, but of course that's 3 too many. Anyway, as was already reported, there were new restrictions released last week that probably you've all heard about, but there were a few additional bits of guidance added today at the governor's press conference just a little while ago. And I'm just going to try and summarize them here real quick, and then just also go through what the underlying guidance is. One of the things that has been encouraged is that we should limit contact with other people to the greatest extent possible, and keep it to your own household as much as you can, realizing that there's no way to do that all the time forever. But for those who may be living in a household where you feel like you're in a dangerous situation, as the term was used, and you feel like you need to leave for your own physical safety, you can do that and go to a safe space. Just because these restrictions are in place doesn't mean you need to stay around in a situation that you feel might be unsafe. Similarly, people who are living alone and have no one in their immediate household can go and stay with other people, another household, a neighbor, let's say. You want to maintain all the same restrictions and social distancing and all that sort of thing, but that is going to be allowed within the parameters of these guidances. Also, just a clarification on outdoor activities with 2 people. If you want to go for a walk with your neighbor, let's say, you can do that. Just maintain, the social distancing and wearing masks and that sort of thing. I'm going to return to what some of those restrictions were in a moment, but I just want to note in passing that nationwide, the picture is also fairly on the grim side. So far since the pandemic began back in last March, over 250,000 Americans have died. And that number grew by nearly 2,000 on Thursday alone. Nationwide, we have about 80,000 people in a hospital or in hospitals, and that's the highest number since the pandemic began. Given that we're on the threshold of the holiday season and Thanksgiving is coming up next week, time when normally many of us would be traveling to be with friends and family, these restrictions, of course, are going to be difficult for many people, but the Centers for Disease Control have warned people against traveling and visiting family for the Thanksgiving holiday. And basically the message seems to be, this is the Thanksgiving that if you really don't need to be together with people outside your immediate family, this might be the Thanksgiving to think about doing that. Thanksgiving celebration should be limited just to immediate households to the greatest extent possible. It's just really important to try and limit the spread of the virus, and the way that that seems to happen is at parties, social events, social gatherings where there's more than 10 people. And Thanksgiving, of course, lends itself to getting large groups of people together. Um, and it just really, this year, it's, they're suggesting that may not be a great idea. So take that for what it's worth. I just wanted to review also some of those restrictions that were put in place last year, last week. Again, multiple household social gatherings suspended. If you It really should be limited only to members of a single household. Restaurant hours are limited. Most restaurants will be closed after 10 o'clock at night. It is possible for them to serve food and beverages by curbside pickup after 10 o'clock, but 10 o'clock should be the time when they close. Also, all restaurants and other public accommodations which host organized non-essential activities should maintain an easily accessible, legible log of all employees, customers, members, and guests, and their contact information for at least 30 days. On recreational sports front, all recreational sports programs, including organized and/or informal recreational youth and adult league sports, practices, games, and tournaments have been suspended. This suspension does not apply, to school-sponsored sports activities which are subject to the applicable Agency of Education guidance. Returning college students, and that's obviously a big one again for Thanksgiving. All students who are returning home from a college or university, in state or out of state, should quarantine at home for 14 days or 7 days with a test, a PCR test, to ensure that you're not testing positive. And that's obviously a very difficult one for a lot of college students who may be attending school out of state. Normally Thanksgiving would be a time to come home. Again, yes, it's possible. You can do it. But you're going to have to figure out a way to work around that quarantine restriction, as well as the not mingling with folks outside your immediate family. It's worth noting that since October 1st, about 71% of cases associated with an outbreak have been linked to a private party or social gathering. Vermont's not seeing significant transmission in places where prevention policies are followed, like schools or childcare facilities. So that tells us that prevention policies and mitigation strategies are working, and the emphasis should be on avoiding unnecessary gatherings, so that essential services, like schools, like workplaces, keeping adults in jobs, preventing infections, see nothing of minimizing deaths, can go on. So all this is also coming at a time when, typically speaking, the ski season would be right around the corner. Many of us would be looking forward to that. And yesterday's New York Times is an interesting article about how the pandemic is potentially going to impact the ski season. The restrictions, the quarantine restrictions around the 14 days, obviously triggering some concern about that. Some hotels and lodging establishments reporting a lot of cancellations because technically someone coming up to go skiing for the, let's say, Thanksgiving holiday, go skiing for 3 or 4 days, that would mean they would have to quarantine for 14. That's not going to work, obviously, for a lot of people, and so therefore there's some concern going out there about how does the ski industry in Vermont, which generates over $1.6 billion a year in economic activity around Vermont, how does it finesse that? And so that's, I guess, a question that has to be answered. At the governor's press conference today, there was a question posed to him about that. And he said that if folks were found violating the quarantine requirements, that their ski passes could be revoked. Um, Sounds like a lot of the enforcement for that is going to fall onto the ski areas itself. How that will all work out, since this is all clearly reliant on the honor system, is not clear at this moment. There's a real balancing act here between a really important economic driver to the state and how we create a situation that would be not lend itself to more super spreader events. On the recreational side, also one happy note, Riley Rink in Manchester will be open for private instruction. They had closed last weekend following the governor's emergency restrictions, but gained a waiver from the state to open for private instruction. They won't be able to open, at least at this point, for general public skating, but for private instruction where safe social distancing is possible. In other words, you have, let's say, one group of folks practicing at one end of the rink and another group at the other. That should be doable. The state has agreed to let them do that. So that's one bright spot there. Just moving on to a few other things here, non-COVID. The Southern Vermont Communications Union District held its annual meeting on November 11th and announced that the town of Londonderry will be joining the CUD. It's also a member already of the Deerfield Valley CUD over in Windham County. So I guess there'll be members of both CUDs at this point, at least for the time being. Board members heard an update on things, progress that's been made. The big event that all the CUDs are waiting for is the culmination of the so-called RDOF process. It's Rural Broadband Development Opportunity Act, something like that. Rural Development Opportunity Fund. Excuse me. It involves about $20 billion in federal funds that will be distributed across the country for expanding broadband development to underserved areas, of which there are a few here in Bennington County as well as elsewhere across the state. The results of that auction won't be known until the end of December, maybe early January. At that point, both CUDs as well as others around the state will have a clear idea how much money they'll have to spend to push forward on bringing broadband to underserved areas. Anyway, we'll see where that all goes. The CUD board heard from members about plans for the future and its business plan. One of the issues they're running into is that while there are some underserved areas around the county, there are also a lot of parts of the county where reasonable broadband service is available. It's a question of cost, and the question will be whether or not there'll be enough customers that the CUD can attract in order to become at least a break-even situation. So that seems to be the next big hurdle. We're going to be doing a little segment around all of that, so I'll be able to discuss that in somewhat greater detail later on. And finally, I just wanted to say, give a shout out to the editor of the Manchester Journal, Darren Marcy, my good friend, who has written a couple of stories in the Journal over the last 2 weeks that are really outstanding on the Slate Ridge shooting range in Paulet, or West Paulet. I'm sure many of you have already heard about the situation here, where there's a shooting range where some of the neighbors are complaining about excessive noise, and there's some, which is way beyond what you'd normally expect from a shooting range. There have been some allegations of threats going back and forth. Darren's story today looks at the owner of the shooting range, who feels also like he's being intimidated by the neighbors. It's worth noting that the shooting range has not yet gotten a zoning permit, and they're kind of engaged in a bit of a court battle at the moment. But anyway, just great reporting by Darren, and on a really important story, and well worth reading if you hadn't had a chance to either catch it on their website or in the print version of the paper. So we'll leave it at that for today. I want to thank you all for being with us. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project. And we won't be back next week, Black Friday. Going to take that day off, but we'll be back the following Friday after that. And hope you all stay safe. And yeah, just take those guidelines seriously. I'm sure many of you have. I know when I go out and I walk around through town, I've seen just about everybody wearing face masks and being smart and intelligent. And let's just keep that up and we'll get through this. There is light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccines. Uh, Not that far away. Again, the health commissioner, Mark Levine, said today that Vermont might be seeing the first doses of vaccine arriving here as early as mid-December. So this will all just hang in there, and we'll get through it, and we'll have a great Thanksgiving next year. All right, take care. Be safe.